So welcome to Module 4, and in this module we're going to talk about how do you amplify and condition the states that people really need to increase their motivation to make change. First of all, though, let's talk a little bit about stress. Gosh, that's kind of at the bottom of all kinds of things. Stress leads people to feeling like they have no control, and if you feel like you have no control, you can get very panicky. And so clinicians really need some tools to turn on an amazing superpower that is the switch to turning off negative patterns. And guess what that is? It's your parasympathetic system. That is
And
a
the
superpower.
therapists need, again, to be able to do two things at one time. One is to be empathic to their clients, at the same time knowing that they can help lead them out of whatever problems that they have, which means that the therapist's own parasympathetic nervous system needs to be activated so they're not caught in the panic. They need to validate and not get caught in the person's panic. So their own calmness is important.
Well, and we say, think about the state you'd like to help your client practice being in. That's the state you want to be in because of this entraining idea, that is that we entrain to the most dominant frequency in the room, and a frequency is a mental state, really. So think about this. Stress acts like a thermometer. So when we come into the world, and you have no stress for the most part, except being hungry and needing your diaper changed and that sort of thing, and then being upset for whatever very small reasons that tend to pass very quickly. But as we get a little bit older, we have life beats us up a little bit here and there, and we kind of gather those experiences. When you were young, relaxation feels like it's at the bottom of the thermometer, if we use this as a metaphor. And as you get older, now this is the top of the thermometer, right here feels like complete relaxation, but you've got all this area here that you're missing out, and which means that your whole system is not getting regenerated.
It's over-arousal. When we do a lot of traveling and we spend a lot of time in airports, we see small children, they can fall asleep anywhere. And it's unfortunate that their parents can't relax. We don't want them to fall asleep in the airport, otherwise they might miss the airplane. But again, they walk around with a level of tension that has become so normal that they don't realize that it's draining their energy and draining their health.
Exactly. Well, so what do we do about that? Well, we have this wonderful system called the parasympathetic system that also employs the vagus nerve, and you've probably heard more and more about the vagus nerve recently from Stephen Porges, who talks about the polyvagal system. And this nerve runs all the way from the brain down into your intestine. This is a very important nerve. It's the longest nerve in your body, and it touches every vital organ and area, including your brain, heart, liver, ears, fertility organs in females, neck, gallbladder, kidney, spleen, so forth. And by the way, here's a little kind of tool for you. If you gently press right under your chin, not too much, just slightly, you'll notice that you'll get a little wave of relaxation. So you just gently press there, and you feel that little wave of relaxation. It's very pleasant. You don't want to press too hard, but that's a nice little tool you can use anywhere you are. So the vagus nerve, what does it do? It activates a parasympathetic state. That's a huge superpower. And when properly stimulated, the vagal nerve turns on neurogenesis, which means it's helping your brain to grow new brain cells. It turns off stress. It turns off the fight-flight experience. It helps your memory sharpen. It lowers inflammation. Can you believe all of this? It helps you resist high blood pressure, and it blocks cortisol, which is the hormone that goes up in stress that has an oxidating effect. And then that's really, really very important. So people have good vagal tone most of the time, but sometimes the vagal nerve doesn't respond like we would like it to do. And we're going to suggest to you, you can increase your vagal tone by humming one thing. That sounds funny. So hum Happy Birthday.
That's also what you're supposed to do twice when you wash your hands to rid yourself of the coronavirus. So you're going to get two benefits.
It all works together.
It works together, so you spend enough time washing your hands, and you increase your vagal tone at the same time.
What else? I mean, it's great, So anyway, we've given you a picture of a person's EEG. This is out of one of the EEGs we took. This is a person who is in major overarousal, and on these EEG brain maps, anytime we see the color green, it means everything's really balanced. And in this case, this person has very high beta. It's a little bit hard to read those numbers. It's per hertz. It's 24, 25, 26, 27, 28 hertz, so far, and it goes all the way up to 30. And where you see red, it means that there's an overactivity going on. And this is a little bit in some areas on the midline in this area where in the cingulate gyrus area, another $25 word in the brain, where people can get looped on an idea, and the idea goes over and over and over again, and then ultimately we really can see problems with OCD in the EEG like this. Well, overarousal is sometimes very helpful because you need it in emergency situations, but much of the time we don't need it, and sometimes children can get into overarousal.
So I want to tell you a story that will demonstrate a couple things. One, when Tiffany was a young girl, when she would do something that she knew that she wasn't supposed to do, she would get defensive because she was scared, and she would become over-aroused that she was going to be in trouble. Well, what happened is one day Carol and the boys were out shopping, doing something, and I was home with Tiffany. And I had bought Carol a very nice magic wand. Carol really loves all things having to do with Arthur and the Arthurian legend and Merlin and those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked by, we had an entertainment shelf where we had the television and some other things on it. And I walked by and just happened to look out of the corner of my eye, and I looked at the really nice magic wand that had crystals on it. And I just moved it, and it was broken.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that the only person that was there at the time would have been Tiffany. So I knew that Tiffany would be scared, over-aroused, and become defensive. So what was I going to do? Well, I spent a lot of time with Tiffany that day, connecting with her, bonding with her, making sure that she and I were very, very connected. So when Carol and the boys came back, we just had the rest of our day. Well, that evening, when it was time for Tiffany to go to bed, she asked me if I would tell her a bedtime story. She liked bedtime stories. And so, let me give you the lead into this. When a person starts to go to sleep, what happens is they begin to let go of consciousness, but they're letting go of beta activity in the brain, and the body's beginning to relax and going into alpha and theta. Theta is a deeper state than alpha. So what I did was lay down with Tiffany. She was in bed, and I'll tell you the story that I told her pretty much in the way that I told her. I said, Tiffany, as you lie there, just let your head rest against the pillow. And you can keep your eyes open, or you can close your eyes and see with your eyes closed and your mind's eye as well as you can with your eyes open. So just allow yourself to relax and listen to my voice as I tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a squirrel, Benny the squirrel. And Benny was a nice looking squirrel, had a gray fluffy coat, and the front of his tummy was all white. And Benny was an industrious little squirrel. At this time of year, Benny was doing his chores because he was running up and down a tree, getting acorns. He was beginning to store the acorns because he knew that winter was going to come and needed to have enough acorns to get through the winter because the snow would cover the ground and he would not be able to find the acorns. And so Benny was running up and down his tree and putting inside this big knot hole where he lived and he stored his acorns. Well, at one point, Benny stopped and took a little break. And he happened to look way out on the horizon. And he saw something walking down the road he had never quite seen before. It caught Benny's eyes, and Benny couldn't understand. It looked like a squirrel, but the squirrel was walking on 2 feet, so the squirrel had a big stick, like a walking stick or a walking cane, and the squirrel was wearing a purple robe, gold stars and moons, and a purple hat. Well, Benny was very, very curious. So he scampered down the tree and across the forest he went. He got to the road. And he said to the squirrel, "Who and what are you? I've never seen anything like this before." And the other squirrel said, "Hi, I am a squirrel. My name is Merlin. I am a magic squirrel." And Benny could not believe what he was seeing. He said, "So you're a magician?" And Merlin said, "Yes, I'm a magic squirrel." And Benny said, "Could you teach me how to do magic?" And Merlin said, "Yes, you look like a very kind young man, and I can teach you magic. Know that we only do white magic, and we only work with people who are very honest." And so Benny went back and continued to do his chores, and Merlin went on the way. And before Merlin had left, he told Benny how to get to his tree. Well, that day, Benny continued to gather acorns, and that night, he was getting ready to go to bed. He was so excited. His little heart just beat as fast as it could be. And he had a hard time sleeping that night because he knew he was going to learn something the next day he had never learned before. Well, that morning, even though he hadn't slept all that much, Benny got up, he did his chores, and when he was ready, when the time came, he scampered down his tree and went exactly to where Merlin told him to go. There was this big oak tree, and Benny climbed up, and there was this big oak door. And Benny knocked on the door, and the door opened very, very slowly, and there was Merlin in his robe, hat, and walking cane. So Merlin said to Benny, "Please come in, have a seat." Now, he says, "I have to go run an errand, and I'm going to leave you here. I want you not to touch anything. You can look, but just don't touch anything, and I'll be back in just a few minutes after I run my errand." So Merlin left, and Benny sat there. And on the shelf, he saw this wonderful magic wand. And just seemed to call to Benny. And Benny says, I'm not supposed to pick it up, but I'll just pick it up and I won't do anything." And so Benny reached over and picked up the magic wand, and just then, Mr. Owl flew by, scared Benny, and dropped the magic wand on the floor, and it broke. And he said, "Oh no, oh, I can't believe I did that. Oh, what am I going to do? I wasn't supposed to do that. What's going to happen?" And so Benny got very scared, and he put the magic wand back together, put it up on the shelf. He was very frightened. He didn't know what to do, and so Benny left and went home. Well, that night, Benny had a hard time sleeping. It was different from the night before. And he tossed, turned. He wanted to learn magic, and he wanted to tell Merlin what had happened. He was so scared that he was going to get into trouble. Well, that next morning, Benny got up. He decided, I have to go tell Merlin. I'm scared, but I have to go tell Merlin. And so Benny clenched his little paws, released them, clenched his little paws, put his feet on the floor, put his shoulders back in the most assertive way that you could be. Felt power in his shoulders, felt the power in his legs, felt the strength in his arms, and he decided, I'm going to go tell Merlin. And so feeling as strong as he could go, then he went over to Merlin's place, climbed up the tree and knocked on the door. And slowly that old door opened up, and there was Merlin, robe and hat and all. And Merlin said to Benny, Benny, I'm surprised to see you. And he said, yes. You know, he says, when I got back here yesterday, you were gone. And Benny said, I have to tell you something. So Merlin said, come on, Benny, come on in and have a seat. And Benny, again, clenched his little paws, released them, clenched his little paws, released them, felt the strength in his shoulders, felt the strength in his legs. He said, Merlin, I did something you told me not to do. Merlin said, oh, what is that? He said, I picked up the wand and you told me not to do that. And Mr. Owl flew by and scared me and I dropped the wand and it broke and I got scared and I didn't know what to do. I was afraid you were going to get mad at me. And so I put the wand back up on the shelf together and I left. And I'm sorry, he says, if you don't want to teach me magic, I will understand because I did something I wasn't supposed to do and I'll be ready to go if you want me to leave. And I said, no, Benny. Actually, I'm glad you came back. He said, you are? He says, yes. You're not the first student that I've had who picked up the magic wand. In fact, this was your first test as a magician. And Benny said, what do you mean? He says, as I told you the other day, I only teach white magic. And in order to teach white magic, I have to have a student that's courageous. And obviously, you were very frightened. And it took a lot of courage for you to come over here and tell me what you had done. And the other thing that I need to have is somebody who's honest. A student who's courageous and honest. That's the only kind of person that can learn white magic rather than dark magic. And so again, you're not the only student that has done that. You came back. Everybody left, but only the students with courage and honesty come all the way back and tell me what was going to happen, what they did. And they said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, the next lesson, since you are courageous and since you're honest, we're going to put this back together. And so Merlin got some magic glue and put that wand back together. And he says, now you've had 2 lessons, and we're going to have many, many lessons of magic. And Benny and Merlin had many, many years together as they were learning to do magic. When I finished the story, Tiffany opened her eyes and said, Daddy, would you ask Carol to come upstairs and bring one of her hypnosis tapes? Carol had some tapes from one of Eric's daughters, and so I went downstairs and got Carol to go upstairs.
Mm-hmm. And so I went upstairs and, Tiffany said, Carol, would you just lie down with me here for a while? I said, oh, of course. And she said, well, listen, there's something I really need to tell you. I said, okay, what is it? She said, well, you know that magic wand Daddy got you? I said, oh, yes, it was really special. She said, well, I have to tell you what I did. I picked it up. I know I wasn't supposed to. And I was just playing with it, pretending to do magic. And I accidentally hit it against the wall. And oh, gosh, it broke in 2 pieces. And I got so scared, I just put it back on the shelf and went back up to my room. And I didn't tell anybody. And I'm so sorry. And I said, oh, wow. I said, well, you know what? This has taken a lot of courage on your part to be able to tell the truth. I said, I'm really impressed that you told the truth. I said, why don't, in the morning, you and I go downstairs. Let's see if we can find some glue and see if we can fix it. And Tiffany went to sleep. She slept very well. She got up the next morning very cheery. And she had a really important learning about how when you tell the truth, and I think she was about 8 years old, which is the time most little children go through kind of a lying period, having trouble telling the truth. When you tell the truth, and you do it in a respectful way, and you really get respect back, then you're safe. You're safe to do that another time. So, very important learning. Well, time travel into the future. When Tiffany was an adult, I said to Tiffany one day, "Tiffany, do you remember that Benny the Squirrel story?" And she said, "Oh, yes. I thought when Daddy was telling me the story, oh no, they know. Oh gosh, I'm going to have to tell them." But she was able to take the story and feel comforted and feel safe, and it turned out well.
So what we did, what I did with Tiffany, and we're talking about state changes. When people are in overarousal, what that means is that they're frightened, scared, maybe defensive, that they don't have tools to handle this particular stress. And this particular stress was to take responsibility for what you've done and to meet that challenge and then tell me or tell Carol. So in this story, there were a couple things that I did. One was to help her get into an alpha theta state. So an alpha theta state has to do with calming the central nervous system, bringing it into a mid-range. And in that mid-range, I told her the story, but I also described to her what it felt like to feel courageous and deal with anxiety, tensing and releasing her hands, bending squirrel's paws, which is an old biofeedback relaxation technique. So tense up the body, relax it, tense up the body, and then to feel her Benny's feet against the floor, to feel strength in her shoulders. Because again, to tell the truth, you want to be able to feel like you're strong enough to do that, deal with whatever consequences you need to deal with, and to move on. And so again, sometimes parents and therapists begin to think about people as being weak, as opposed to what they need to do is to remember the strength, and in remembering the strength, then use that resource to move forward. Again, when people get into habitual lying as adults, habitual drug abuse, what's happened is in their learning, partly through biology, but partly through social learning, they have never learned how to feel strong and empowered. And the strength and empowerment doesn't mean being a bully. Strength and empowerment means being able to rise to the occasion of the situation that confronts you and doing what you need to do in order to get the task done, in this case, to tell the truth. And so children are going through developmental stages and learning. And we think of learning theory a lot because each developmental task, the child needs to remember the resources, which they already have, bring those resources to bear in a more complicated situation that they might have found themselves in as a younger child, and then meet the demands with that. And again, the story, again at nighttime for parents, and also with therapists, storytelling is one way to help relax the person, to trigger the unconscious mind, to help the person relax, and then begin to connect with resources.
That's exactly right. So we're going to talk about some neuro strategies for lasting change, and we've been actually talking about that since we started this module, but you mentioned Richard Davidson earlier and the work that he did studying monks' brains. What he found, and actually this was replicated finding from a long time ago from a researcher called Cade, C-A-D-E, in London, who was looking at monks' minds and people that were very, very advanced meditators. And both of these people discovered that we can learn how to replicate the mind of a monk. And actually, you don't have to spend 40,000 hours of meditation to learn to do this. But the result is that people develop what we call whole brain state. And that means that blood flow is equalized in the brain, and a variety of other things happen when we call this our ratio of brain frequencies are correct depending on our activity. We'd like to review the frequency states just a little bit in a different way so that you kind of have an idea about what goes on in relation to them physiologically. So delta, as you recall, is 0 to 4 cycles per second. And delta is associated with the proliferation of stem cells. This is very important in terms of our regeneration and healing. Psychics and mystics have a lot of delta when they're awake. And this is also the foundation of deep sleep.
Theta, about 4 to 7 cycles per second, or 4 to 7 hertz, regenerates the human cartilage. So if you have damage with your cartilage, a theta state helps that regenerate,
Right.
increases antioxidants and increases serotonin and repairs the DNA.
That's right. It's pretty amazing. Theta is this fundamental frequency of the Earth, which is called the Schumann frequency. So the Earth vibrates at 7.8 hertz. And healers tend to function in this state during their healing practices. And then creativity and intuition is stimulated in theta. Well, we talked about, I just mentioned Cade, Maxwell Cade. He called alpha the bridge to the unconscious mind, and that was quite a long time ago. Alpha is the best state from the research literature to treat post-traumatic stress disorder. We'll be talking about a process to do that in a while. So when thinking about trauma, what happens at the frequency level is the brain shrinks up delta, goes way down, theta and alpha, and the brain stays in over-arousal then.
Right.
So as we use these certain tools, the brain returns to normal.
Again, the key to all of this is learning the brainwave frequencies, the states, because these delta, theta, alpha, beta, high beta are really connected to different states of arousal, different mental states. And with trauma, again, as you said, delta, theta, and alpha actually, a frequency amplitude tends to go way down.
Right.
And not having that, one of the things that leads people into obsessive behavior, often angry behavior, aggressive behavior, helping the person change the brain state. So again, they are able to increase delta, increase theta, increase alpha. Then they're able to think more clearly,
Right.
to respond and behave more appropriately. And so again, even with cognitive behavioral therapy, the key here is to be able to change or help the client change the brain state and reconnect with a part of them so they're more functional.
Exactly. So the research tells us when you can sustain your alpha frequency as the most dominant frequency, just for 15 seconds, you're really regenerating yourself. We'll be also talking about some fairly inexpensive little biofeedback tools you can get on the market that can help you learn to do this. Like a little device we have is called the Muse, M-U-S-E, the Muse. And it teaches you how to get into alpha and sustain it with some feedback, audio feedback.
And lest people think that they're in kind of necessarily a dreamy state, they've tested athletes. And athletes are performing the best, and they may be in very active states. So quarterbacks, wide receivers, pole vaulters, baseball players, they're not being passive, but their alpha level increases. So when they're performing the best, they're able to focus in a relaxed, attentive way, and their alpha has increased.
That's right. And then, so as you get into the right ratio of frequencies, the next frequency we want to mention is gamma again. When this is bursting, people have transformative experiences. Some people talk about feeling like they have awakened in a way that they haven't done before, and they have amazing self-awareness and deep understanding and clarity. And gamma again bursts around 40 to 60 hertz and comes out of alpha, theta, delta. And it is also the mark of the flow state. Well, interestingly enough, some researchers took mice who were bred for Alzheimer's and beamed gamma frequency through light into their noses. That must have been uncomfortable.
Yep.
Anyway, and what happened was it resulted in a 50% reduction of these amyloid plaques in the brain.
And the amyloid plaques connect with Alzheimer's.
And that's pretty amazing. So again, if you think about how does change come about, we're frequency beings, really, and if we stimulate the right frequency and we entrain to the right frequency outside of ourselves, a lot of healing takes place. Well, we've mentioned PTSD a variety of times, but untreated PTSD gets worse over time. And the same thing is true with people with PTSD. If we can stimulate their gamma frequency, trauma tends to dissolve, stress hormones are lowered, feelings of happiness increase, and we're going to be talking about a certain kind of experience that will lead you through in Module 5 that will show you how to stimulate this gamma.
Again, with gamma, this is when monks were meditating on compassion. They would have bursts of gamma coming out of alpha and theta because there was compassion. Compassion for others and compassion for self really is a two-way street. So as there were bursts of gamma, the person with PTSD was likely to feel more compassion towards other people and compassion towards themselves. And again, when people have been traumatized, especially like your client that you talked about in a previous module, when he lost so much, there's anger and it is involved with grief. Well, helping them to increase alpha and theta and the compassion, when you were working with them, were very compassionate. You were compassionate in a way that paced and modeled for him in a very slow and deliberate way, not going too fast. He was able to become self-compassionate and again began to think about a future.
That's right. Well, according to some MRI scans with people that have done between 20,000 and 40,000 hours of meditation, and Richard Davidson was studying this at the University of Wisconsin, he's found apparently there's absolutely no limit to the growth of the brain. So as people do a meditation, and what are they doing? They're stimulating certain frequencies in meditation. The actual matter in the brain gets thicker, and we grow new pathways in the brain. And therefore, what that means is, wow, there's no limit to your human abilities. Can you get your mind around it? Obviously, we can't do certain things, like a little girl said to her mother, "Mommy, I want to be a tree." Well, you can imagine being a tree, but there are some limitations humanly.
You can be a tree in your school play,
right.
but you're not going to grow roots into the ground.
Not yet, so
Not
far. But it just seems like, maybe the brain is really unlimited. At least we haven't found the limits of it yet. So, like we said, we don't have to do 40,000 hours of meditation. There are lots of other things we can do. And some of you have been trained in EMDR, which is a wonderful tool. But we are bilateral beings, right?
Yes.
So when we walk, it's a bilateral activity. And by the way, when you walk, you're equalizing blood flow in the hemispheres.
Bilateral sound, so clapping, using both hands to clap, or if you're drumming, just moving again one side to the other, you're using both hemispheres of the brain as you're moving your hands up and down. That's why probably the happiest person in a rock and roll band is always the drummer.
Right.
I've
Exactly.
never seen an unhappy drummer.
Right.
They tend to be having a great time. You go way back to the Beatles. The one that was having best time was Ringo,
Right.
and you see other drummers the same way.
Right. So, you know, EMDR, like we said, is a wonderful tool. But look, you can also do this, and we like to get these little balls from Amazon that will light up like this. So what you do with this, if a person's having, let's say, an intense feeling about something, you ask them to give you a simulated subjective measure of disturbance, 1 to 10. That's just picking a number, 1 to 10. 10 being high on, let's say, if it's tension or upset. And you ask them now to take a ball and toss it across their midline, like this. It kind of keeps their attention. The kids love this when the light is going off. And about 6 or 8 times, and then you ask them to pause. And then you say, what number would you be now? And much more often than not, people's number comes down immediately. Sometimes it only comes down 1, and sometimes it comes down very low. And then you say, okay, well, let's just see if that can come down anymore. And so you have them toss a ball again, about 6 or 8 times across the midline. And this is our bilateral stimulation, and they're watching the ball. And, you know, by the way, sometimes people stop breathing when you ask them to do this, so you want to encourage them to breathe. Sometimes clients feel a little like they're doing a performance. That was pretty good.
Yeah, it was good. I'm glad you got that.
That would hurt, sorry. And so you keep doing this until, see if you can get the number down to 0. Now, sometimes people will go down to a 1, and for a variety of psychological reasons, they don't want to go down to 0, because I've had some clients say to me, I really think I need to keep a little bit of this, so I'm motivated to work on this issue. And that's okay. But now they've gotten a tool they can do at home, and it's very, very powerful. Actually, you know, even we've had some clients use this with allergies, and they can get their sinuses to open by tossing a ball back and forth. Don't believe it? Try it. Try it out and see what happens.
It's a balance in the blood flow
That's right.
in the brain, and blood flow on both sides of the bodies, and often is associated with the release of inflammation.
Yeah. And so I had a client who, she had a car accident, and she was getting really, really very anxious driving, and we worked on that driving fear in the office by her tossing the ball. She got herself really down, comfortable. She'd get back in the car, and sometimes her number would go back up. And I said, now, don't throw the ball in your car while you're driving, right? But she invented herself tapping on the steering wheel. And she could do that without distracting herself. She could still pay attention. I thought that was brilliant. And so there's another alteration of a bilateral stimulation. So anything that's bilateral is really, really powerful for people. Well, another tool we call the deep dive or a zero gravity state for fun that we'll be talking about in Module 5. But this is what happens, and that is you develop this whole brain state with equal blood flow. And if we were to do an EEG on somebody who's been working on this, their brain map would look all green, just like the picture I've given you in the PowerPoint. Why do you want to be in a whole brain state? Because you are entering into what we call a state of coherence. Well, what's the significance of that? It means that if you have equal blood flow in your hemispheres, your parasympathetic system is turned on. You are now in a state of what we call psychological coherence, of stability. And then you can practice being in this state. You can get yourself in the state with tossing the ball, feel the state, kind of go over it in your mind. Every time you review the state, you're conditioning the state. And so we find these tools to be very, very useful. So we encourage you to try them out, starting with yourself first, and then using them with clients.
So whatever controls your attention controls your life. When you can control your physiology, you are in control of your life. You may not be able to control what's going outside of you, but you learn how to control your response to that. And you go beyond the ordinary reactive mind. And what that means is that when you're in a whole brain state, when there is equal blood flow on both sides of the body, both sides of the brain, when you have access to alpha and theta and gamma, and all of the brainwave frequencies can be involved with the particular tasks that you're involved with, what happens is you, like Sullenberger, operate in your most efficient. So again, people sometimes equate being over-aroused with functioning the best. That's not true. You can be focused and in a mid-range of arousal, even in a very dangerous situation, like Sullenberger landing the airplane. So when you find yourself able to control your physiology, then you're able to respond, rather than react, most efficiently to the external circumstances around you.
Mm-hmm. And we think, Bill, I've talked about this a lot. We think maybe this trying to find and practice in yourself a non-reactive mind
Right.
is maybe a lifelong process.
Yes.
But the more we are able to do that, overall, the happier people are, for sure.
When you listen to the Dalai Lama, and he will interact with people, his sense of delightful humor, not sarcasm, just delightful humor comes across. And people ask him all sorts of questions, some very profound, great questions, some kind of snarky questions. But the Dalai Lama tends to respond to all of them with a degree of respect and a degree of connection. So here's somebody, again, who was run out of China with a price on his head, run out of Tibet, and again, they were wanting to take him out. And what he's been able to do is more than any other Dalai Lama to connect with the whole world. And again, his meditation, his ability to feel connected, even with those people who tend to challenge him, he's able to respond in the most helpful way to them and to himself.
So he really models for us, really, where
Yes.
we're all hoping to go. Well, we're gonna give you some really simple things to do that will develop this quick coherence from altering your state quickly. And one is that we call relaxing the tongue. This is again an old biofeedback tool. I remember when our editor was working on our brain change therapy book, she was trying to figure out how to relax her tongue. So we suggest you think about your tongue like a little boat in your mouth, and think about relaxing it from the back to the front. So it's just it might float a little bit, and then you can let it settle and put the front of your tongue behind your bottom teeth, just so relaxed. And you're activating your alpha frequency when you do this.
You also talk about breathing through your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And again, to imagine that as you breathe, that your heart is actually breathing. So as you relax your tongue, imagine that you're breathing through your heart.
Right.
Just take a moment to do that for a second.
Right.
And what happens is that your breathing becomes deeper and more relaxed.
That's right.
And then to focus on curiosity. All of us come into the world with all sorts of curiosity. The world is a fascinating place. And if you are relaxed, you begin to notice patterns. You begin to notice patterns that you never noticed before. And then you begin to understand things that are more possible than you would ever think. Again, we both like physics, and to be aware that the faster that you would go, the closer you come to the speed of light. which right now we can't go beyond. The closer you get to, time slows down. There have been movies that have shown that, but this actually I've seen worked out mathematically. Now that's amazing when you think of the universe, that what is happening inside this spaceship is going close to the speed of light, and what's happening outside it, time is different. Or when you're in increased gravity, same thing happens. So if you're at the event horizon of a black hole where the gravity increases, if you're outside the event horizon, you would look at the event horizon and things would look stopped. If you were able to look back from the event horizon, things were like going in fast motion. But one of the fascinating things about this universe, about this world, is time is not unified. Time happens differently. So again, if you become curious about all sorts of things, the world and the universe is a fascinating place.
And we're learning new things all the time. Well, you mentioned Herbert Benson a while ago, who did this work on the Tibetan monks and filmed them drying their sheets by raising their body temperature when they chanted. Well, he came up with this idea to develop a very quick meditation tool. It's almost not a meditation, but he called it the relaxation response. And it was another way of doing transcendental meditation, which you have to go and take a course, which is a very useful tool. There's a lot of really great research on that. But the relaxation response is done this way. So you close your eyes, you imagine the number 1 on your mental screen, and as you exhale, you see the number 1 go out into the distance. So do that with me. So close your eyes, imagine the number 1, exhale, see the 1 go out in the distance, and then bring it back. Your mind will chatter a little bit, and you just let the thoughts come in and go, and you bring your attention back to the 1. And again, this will turn on your alpha frequency, and it's a very, very useful tool to do. Doesn't take any time at all. And then you, again, are entering into a whole brain state, and that's what we are very interested in. Well, what's another way to enter into a whole brain state? Well, one of the things we often do with clients is we talk to them about, have you ever had an experience of awe, AWE? Have you ever been anywhere where you were out in nature and it was just so astoundingly beautiful you were without words? There are other ways that Broca's area goes offline when you're overwhelmed with beauty. And that is very, very regenerative to a human body, to be in that sort of thing and to be out in nature. You know, most of us that live in cities don't get very much of that. So it's really important to encourage people to have.
The universe is this complex, intricate entity of which we are a part. And if you go out in nature, again, you see more intricate patterns of animals and plants that it's really hard to ever get bored.
It really is.
And to feel stressed because you're a part of all this.
And you're connected to everything. Everything is alive. So if you take a walk, all the trees you see, they're alive, and the little animals you see are alive. And maybe from time to time you have this little really interesting connection.
I saw a clip that our oldest daughter-in-law sent to us. So her youngest daughter, Juliet, was out in a big field, and Cookie, their dog, were both looking at horses. So here was this 5-year-old little girl, and Cookie, her dog, just absolutely engrossed in horses that were across the field, and they were out in nature and feeling a part and in awe of what was going on.
That's really neat. That's neat.
And so dealing with the coronavirus and the lockdown, they were, of course, with social distance, but again, they were connected in a way that was very energizing to them.
Well, I fairly recently had wonderful experience teaching at the Institute of Noetic Sciences in California that was begun by Gordon Mitchell, the astronaut. And, you know, he had an amazing experience when he was in his space shuttle coming back to Earth. And he was looking at Earth from space and had this kind of enlightening experience. It was kind of an experience of feeling unified and connected with all that is. And it occurred to him he wanted to explore what that does for people. And now, so you all might want to watch what's happening. IONS is beginning to build a virtual reality experience where people can have a simulated experience of seeing the Earth from space, only it's really very much more real than just looking at a picture.
So what we're encouraging you to do as therapists is to get in touch with your own curiosity, to get in touch with your own alpha and theta, and your own sense of awe. Because as you develop awe for the universe, nature, going out and walking, when you sit with your patient, your client, just like Milton Erickson did, to develop a sense of awe and curiosity about what is this person capable of doing. They may be doing something that is destructive to themselves and other people. Know that they're attempting to reorganize themselves in a way to meet some challenge, but they need help. Part of the help is to get back in touch with the unconscious mind, to get in touch with their own resources that they have. So if you can sit with a sense of respectful awe, curiosity towards your client, towards this patient, then it's easier for you to be in touch with what their strengths are and to encourage them to go on this exploratory adventure and see how that then can help them solve the problem that's in front of them.
That's right. And so what the research says to us that the state of awe, and it is a mental state, has been linked to increased well-being and altruistic behavior. And so when you use it in therapy, clients will come out of negative states, and you'll find that then doing that quiets their worry, it interrupts it.
You model for them the state of awe, and from a modeling perspective, that clients begin to pick that up.
That's right. So we want to encourage you to intentionally think about how you're shaping your clients' perceptions and how you're helping them shape a certain state. So what are you doing intentionally to shape perceptions in your work? We would like you to take a few moments and really think about this question. In fact, maybe write down some notes about how you're doing it now, but maybe how you might want to do it in the future. So we've talked about developing the therapeutic relationship, being attuned, and having your client being listened to without giving solutions, and all of that produces more alpha, and it helps people open up and create this alpha state and so forth. We've given you a list of things from the research literature that demonstrate what causes states to change, and we've given you some references on that.
Physiology, language, the focus to change, the emotional state, activating motivation, determination, your own level of arousal, and mental imagery. And again, as you tune the clients with your own curiosity, your own sense of awe, then again, what you're doing is creating, we can look at this as a brain state, inviting another brain state to model with it this sense of awe, curiosity, so they begin to get in touch with their own strengths. And it's the state that we're encouraging you to be in for yourself, and so that you don't get caught with your client's fear, validate it, and realize that your ability to stay appropriately individuated, appropriately connected and separate, then begins to model both at a behavioral level and an energetic level, a brain state level, for the client to begin to make the changes.
That's right. So we'd like to give you a little homework assignment. We'd love for you to go take some moments now after this module and find some pictures for yourself that give you the feeling of awe. And notice how you feel when you look at certain things. There'll be certain kinds of pictures that you're particularly drawn to. And spend at least 10 minutes looking at these pictures. And then after that, notice how long the feeling lasts for you. Notice maybe what you do to lose the feeling, and go back and remind yourself how to get back in the feeling by looking at some of those pictures. So the newest science of change really demonstrates that elevated mental states produce thoughts that often become reality. So place your mind in awe for you becoming awesome.
Right.
Well, in Module 5, we're going to discuss some really fascinating research into very deep states of mind and their healing qualities, and we think you'll find this pretty interesting.
So we will see you on the other side.